Morning. Oh, bit of feedback. Hello, welcome to the Secrets of Protracker seminar, delving into the world's most popular tracker. My name is Hoffman. That'll do as an introduction, won't it? So what we're going to be doing today is going through some of the tricks within Protracker that you can do, a little bit of history, all that kind of stuff. So we'll just get started, shall we? So first of all, obviously it's on the Amiga, which is the best computer ever made. The Amiga sound hardware's got 4 channels of 8-bit PCM, digital. Stereo sort of, in the sense that 2 channels are on the left and 2 channels on the right. Single most pointless thing they ever did. Sample playback is also controlled by the DMA, which means that you load up with the CPU the sample you want to play, and it just the DMA takes over. So it means that it's all nice and quick. Quick bit of tracker history. Kind of started out on the C64. And obviously we get to the ultimate sound tracker, which is obviously the first of all the kind of trackers. And then if you've got your noise tracker, your star tracker, and all the other kind of variations of that. And then came along Protracker and modern rubbish. So okay, so the software limitations within Protracker is you could have 31 samples, 64 steps per pattern, 64 unique patterns, and 128 pattern sequence, which is not a lot. So why it was so popular, when it was introduced, it obviously introduced the CIA BPM, which meant that you could change the tempo of your track to really suit the kind of music style you were doing. It also meant that people with NTSC Amigas could play chiptunes properly at last. Fine-tuned sample pitching as well meant that if you got a sample that was slightly out of tune, you could tune it up. It's great for drum samples as well, because you could get them to fit better. Multitude of additional effects over the previous trackers. And the real big win was the graphical sample editor and built-in sampler. So you could really see what you were playing with. And you could obviously load all your sound tracker, noise tracker modules into it as well. Some pointless statistics from Modland, which were taken about a month ago. As you can see, there is many more Protracker tunes within the Modland archive than there are Impulse Tracker and Fasttracker combined. About 250 of them are mine. So there's a pattern structure. What you'll notice if you use things like Fasttracker or Impulse Tracker is the one thing that's missing is a volume control on the channel, which you don't have, which is actually a real pain in the backside. But there's loads of ways around that. Okay, so the first trick we're going to look at is sample number hacking, chiptune-tastic wave switching, and volume control. So what you do when you're doing sample switching is you set the sample number on the pattern line without a note. What that does, that triggers it to reload the sample parameters, but doesn't actually trigger the note. So what happens is that it will kind of, when it runs out of sample data, it will just start playing the next bit of sample data that you've queued up. So you can see there, we've got one note, and then you just see the A, B, C, D, where it switches the samples. And if this works, I think, there we go. So just a quick example here. So the 4th channel there, you can see, it's just hitting that first note and then having the arpeggiators as the commands, and then it just cycles through each of those waveforms. So each of those waveforms are at different levels and different kind of shapes. So what you get is like a decay on the volume, but obviously because you haven't got a volume control, you have to use those waveforms. Pretty basic stuff. And just another quick example when you're doing it with a lead line. So if we look at this lead line in channel 3, you'll see that obviously it's using each of those waveforms there, which are different. If we have a look at the waveforms as well. So you see it's just a square wave, but it just moves a little bit, so it gives you that kind of C64 pulse width modulation effect. Okay. So a bit of extra volume control that you can do is you can use sample 0 with no note attached, with a note attached. So what this does is it triggers the sample again, but without changing any of the parameters. So whatever parameters for the sample are in memory at the time, it just keeps re-triggering it. So it means that, so if you see the example on the left is I'm setting the volume hard for every single note, where on the right, you set the volume to 0 and then you can increase it. So the benefit of that is that if you've written it all in with hard numbers, just setting the volume, and you want your volume control to be a bit slower or faster, you've got to rewrite all the numbers. Where obviously on the option on the right, you can just take them out or change some of the numbers to get a better rise or fall. I've got an example of that somewhere. Which one's that? I did have an example of that, but it's gone missing. Okay, moving on. So sample offset. This is one of the really big wins with Protracker. Was this single command alone is amazing. So the 9 command, what it does is it plays a sample from a further point. So you could have like a big long drum loop and say find the point within the sample where say the first or second snare hits, and you can keep triggering that little bit. So the way it physically works is the parameter you've got, which is 1 byte. So say in this example it's 12. That would play the sample from 1200 in hex. So resequencing and time stretching a sample. Again, you use the 9 command to trigger the sample from different sections. And if you want to time stretch it, you interpolate those values in between. So here we go. So this first pattern is just how you would do it without, it's just. So you see that's just playing the sample from the start each time. So using the 9 command, we can re-trigger different parts of it, so we can resequence the entire loop. And then, of course, if you want to do time stretching, as you can see there, we can just put in additional points in between those. So you kind of interpolate the values, and you can kind of play drum loops at different pitches. So adding more samples. So again, you can, obviously you've got only 31 samples. You do tend to run out of those pretty quickly if you're writing a big tune. So you can use the 9 command to hide additional samples behind the samples you've already got. So what you do is you copy the sample for pasting, you extend out your destination sample to a nice round number, and then you paste it at the end, and then you use the 9 command to trigger the second sample. The first time I saw this was in one of the most popular mods of all time, which is this. And it's actually used straight away in like the second pattern here. So if we go and have a look at that sample, you'll see it's actually 2 samples hidden in there. And if you look at the data, you see, because it's quite short, he's cutting the volume every time he's triggered it from the start, and then when he wants to play the looped one, he then jumps in through 9 there and then fades it out. And if you actually look through the rest of this module, which is right, you'll see they're dotted about all over the place. There's like 3. So I mean, there's 3 there. So that was the first time I saw it. To actually do it within Protracker itself. So we take a quick example pattern here. Whoop. So let's just take this one here, for example. Just 3 samples there. So what you would do is there's your kick, snare. So what you do is you range that, copy it, go to your next sample, and what I'm going to do is I'm just round this up to a nice 20. and then you zoom right into the end, because you can't just click to the end, because you might miss it. There we go. And then you paste that into there. And then all we do is, every time that snare is played, change that to 8. So it's the same thing there. So that sample there, we can actually kill that one now. So we've merged 2 into 1. You can keep doing this. The thing you have to be really careful of is obviously if you play this sample on its own, obviously that snare tries to sneak out afterwards, so you have to cut the volume on it afterwards. Okay, any more samples? Now this is a trick that I found just last month actually. This is quite cheeky. So this is offset and volume control. So obviously when you're triggering a sample, you can't control the volume on it because you're using the 9 command to trigger the sample. So this trick here, you'll see on the 3rd line there, you've got the sample number and the 9 command, which basically loads up the sample pointers into the channel, but doesn't play anything, doesn't change anything. And obviously the note there being played afterwards then just keeps playing the sample from that position. I've got it here somewhere. Here we go. So it's as simple as that, basically. So you can obviously change this and trigger that from, say, there. So it's really handy when you run out of samples. Sidechaining. So yes, this is there's only one other guy I know that does this, which is Esau, if he's here. May not yet. So what is sidechaining? Sidechaining is it's an audio compression technique where you invertly compress a sound from a key. So what you have is obviously your big ass bass sound and your kick drum, and every time that kick drum kicks in, the volume on your bass drops out, so it creates more room. You know, I'm preaching to the converted. Everyone's used it in here, haven't they? So how to fake it in Protracker is basically every time the kick and snare is played in your track, you do volume control on all the other channels. So you set it really low and then ramp it up really quickly. So let's have a look at. So as he's here, this is Esau's track from revision last year. So we just skip through to so if we cut the drums out of this, so you can hear it's ducking out when those drums aren't there, but obviously you put the drums back in. And it fills the gap. Now the thing to remember is when you start doing this, you have to do it for everything, and it takes a long bloody time. Right? It is painful, but once you start, obviously you can't stop. So there's 2 ways you can do this, and we can probably see both examples in here. So on this particular sample here, you'll see that the volume is being set with the C command there, and then being ramped up. Where on this one here, you'll see that the sample there is probably already set to a low volume, so you don't need to obviously set it. That gives you a bit more control. Let's see if we get. Oh god, no, wrong place. Have a look. So let's just get another quick example as well. So this is an example of doing a really short, sharp shock kind of effort on the sidechaining. So it sounds really ducky there, doesn't it? It sounds a bit awful without the drums there. But as soon as you put the drums back in, fills the gap nicely. Okay, so this is some technical information on the A command, which it's odd in the way that it works. So what happens is, obviously, your speed in Protracker is set to, say, 6, for example. So that means there's 6 frames within the line. The A command actually only works on 5 in that instance, because the first frame, it doesn't do anything. So if you want to calculate how much you want to ramp it by, you have to take the speed of the track, the tempo of the track, take away 1, and then multiply your parameter by that value, and that's exactly how many you will ramp it by. Of course, if you just ramp everything to max, then you don't need to worry about that. Okay, pattern stunts, reversing, scratching, jumping around, and generally showing off. Okay, so for this, you use 2 commands. So you've got the song jump command, which is B, and the pattern break. So the pattern break command is you'd use, say, if you want to end a pattern sooner than its intended position, you just put that in, and then you can obviously tell it to jump to a position within the next pattern. The song jump allows you to jump, say, at any point within the track. So the reason why you have to do it in a particular order is because one command overwrites the parameter that the other one uses. So you have to put the B command first to tell it which pattern to go to, and then the D command to tell you where you're going within the next pattern. Oh, hang on. So this is, on the very first pattern this is used here. So if we go back and actually stop that before it disappears. So right from the top of the pattern, you'll see we've got a B command to tell us to jump to the same pattern, the same position in the song, and then tell it to jump down to position 63. And then again, it just iterates up, just saying, right, just jump to the next line up, all within the same position. Then when you get right to the end, it says, OK, jump to the first line of the next pattern. So, I mean, it takes up a lot of space within your pattern, so you end up losing 2 effects, basically. So it's quite a juggling act to get them in. Let's have a look at the...
What we're gonna do right here is go back, 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 back.
So that scratch there, if we can catch it in time, is the same principle, but all you do is you jump from here to there, to there, to there, and you kind of then jump back into the spaces that you've created. So that's how that works. No. Yes, next level crazy. So now we shall watch Black Queen by Dreamer, because it is mental. So this is when you kind of employ those techniques. Yeah, well, you'll see. Yes, that is a very effective way of running out of patterns. Who here had never seen that before? There we go. Great. It is quality. Okay, extra channels. So there was a little app or little program that someone created called Mod to SMP. What you can do with that is you can take a section of your, let's actually see the slide, that'd be helpful. You can create a single sample from a segment of a pattern. It's best used on drums generally. To retain the sound quality, the best bet is to have all of your drums at the same frequency so that obviously it doesn't resample them, because when you resample an 8-bit sample, it sounds rubbish. So let's just do this as a quick example. So that's just, as you can see, a drum pattern which has got, all 4 channels used there. So with Mod to SMP, you can load up your sample, your module, if you can find it. Okay, so you set your start and end point within the pattern. I think is that. Set your CIA speed. You shouldn't need to set the VBL speed if you've already got it set in the tune, so that shouldn't be a problem. Put your volume up to max, and then set the sample note that you want it to mix it at. Have I got that right? We'll find out in a minute. As we wait. So there we go, that's now one single sample, so we can save that. We'll just chuck that into... Okay. And obviously we can go back to Protracker, load up our tune. Yeah, that will do. So if you can hear the kind of, how accurate it is when it mixes it down. See, tasty. So that's how you add an extra channels. So an additional tip on that is obviously if you're writing a rather large module, is to keep a spare copy of the module with all of your drum samples in, and then on your main project module, you can obviously remove all of those samples, but if you need a different variation on those drums, you just reload your old module. Okay, quick few tips on sample conversion. The best bet is to not use a sampler on the Amiga because they don't sound great. The best trick is to basically use your 44 kilohertz 16-bit source samples, convert them to mono. The best bet's usually just to grab, say, the left channel or the right channel, unless you have to mix them together. And what you need to do is apply all of your pre-processing, so EQ, compression, make it as loud as you possibly can, obviously without making it sound rubbish. And while it's at 16-bit, you then resample it to the required frequency you need in Protracker. And the last bit you do is then convert it to 8-bit. If you convert it to 8-bit, at any point before that, you will lose all the detail in your sample and it will sound rubbish. And of course, you've got to convert it to IFF or 8SVX. There's the frequency calculation. I won't bore you too much with the details on that, but there is you basically take the period from Protracker for the note you want and then put it through that formula, and then you'll end up with the sampling frequency that you actually need to resample it to. Okay, bit of Fasttracker 2. Yes, it's a pretty awesome tracker. So let's watch what Strobe of Titan did with it, even though we're actually going to use Milky. That'll do. it's not quite fitting, but that you should still get the idea. So this tune is very. Oh, you can't really see that. Hang on. Apologies. Layout, Jesus. That'll do. That's a bit better. Excellent, we're there. Right, so this is an example of how to spunk all 256 patterns that you get in Fasttracker 2 in a minute.
Are you ready to experience strobe like you never have before?
That is pretty damn awesome, isn't it? Who would like to watch another strobe mod or XM? I think we just do this one as well, shall we? This one's called I Ran Out of Patterns. Yes. I think Strobe definitely deserves a round of applause for that. That is some crazy shizzle. And that's it. That's the end of the seminar. I hope you enjoyed it. I didn't actually time it, so I didn't realise it was only going to be half hour. If anyone's got any questions? Excellent. That's perfect. One there.
Hoffman, can you share this material?
Share this material?
Yeah.
What, the slides and stuff? Oh, yeah, not a problem.
Presentation. Okay.
Of course, if you've got any questions throughout the weekend, I'm obviously getting drunk. So, yeah, ask me then, and I'll definitely tell you. Yeah. So, excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Oh, there's one there.
I have just a simple piece of information, so to speak. The first one that you showed, actually that changing the samples without having a note doesn't work on Protracker 3 and all of those modern trackers. That's worthy of mention, especially
It is worth mentioning that a lot of the tricks you see here don't work everywhere. But then if you're not playing it in Protracker 2.3D, then what are you doing? So
exactly, but I just thought somebody might be interested to know that.
Yeah, it's the new offset trick does work in XM Play, thank God, because it would be useless here in about half hour. But you have to have the mode set to PT1, otherwise it loses the plot completely. Excellent. Oh no, one more.
Do you have to be drunk to make what we've just seen?
It helps, yeah. I usually find a couple of beers beforehand helps. But don't go too far, because you'll end up just deleting samples by accident and stuff. Excellent. Right, thanks, everyone.